All right, we are live. So thank you everyone for joining us, everyone who's here. We'll let people trickle in a bit, but let's go ahead and just do some introductions. Um, Hold on, I'm going to try and share. I don't want to share screen more than is kind of necessary, but oh, the Zoom interface is bad. Let's go ahead and share this. Um, so yeah, I just want to introduce our special guest today. Um, Hold on, that should be working now. Yeah, so with us, we've got Greg Finn. You might know Greg from the Marketing O'Clock podcast. Greg is such a bright and outspoken person in the industry. He's probably, what are you, the most pro Google person on the most pro Google podcast ever? Is that right?
It literally started as a joke because I would call them out on things. And I think this year I might actually like organically win it because I'm so positive on the outlook of Google.
Well, I want to hear more about that. And I'm throwing up some QR codes so you can check out that podcast. It's my platform, and I'll plug if I want to, plug if I want to, plug if I want to. I also want to shout out Navah for joining us. Thank you so much, Navah, for coming on here to talk about Performance Max. By the way, this webinar, in case you stumbled in here on accident, it's about a State of PMax report that I wrote last week or published last week. And Navah also wrote a really great study about Performance Max last year for Optmyzr. So I just want to shout that out too.
Thank you. It's worth noting that your study did the useful thing of just looking at e-commerce, whereas ours looked at lead gen and e-commerce. So there were all the questions about, hey, what about for me? What about for me? So next time I'll just have to copy you and just do lead gen.
Yeah,
And
well, yeah, I'm
have
sure
the
the
lead
lead
gen
gen
report
people.
and the e-commerce report.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I don't have any or practically no lead gen data. So, and I'm sure there's all the lead gen people wondering what the heck is going on. I think PMax is more popular with e-commerce right now than lead gen. And then, yeah, last plug. This is my report. You can scan that QR code and get a link to the article. There's also a PDF version that you can download, and we might refer to that PDF version in the course of this once or twice. So, yeah, thanks, everyone for taking the time to join this live stream, and thank you, Navah and Greg, for being here. I really appreciate it. Let's get back to our faces here. So, and there's also, by the way, there's a Q&A panel to people listening. You can submit questions, and I don't know, maybe we can see maybe some we address as they come or others at the end. But always really glad to get other people's like inputs, clarification questions, whatever. So yeah, I mean, a little bit just a word about this report. As Navah said, it was focused on e-commerce data and was looking at data from around about 4,000 campaigns from about 500 different advertising accounts. And this summed up to quite a bit of data in there. You know, it's a sample, it's imperfect. It's primarily European. There's not really a lot of SMBs in there. Or at least not by European standards. They probably are SMBs by US standards because the market in here is so much more fragmented. But yeah, that's kind of the view on there, and we'll talk about some of the data in there. We looked in there at like cost adoption, what's happening. I also tried to shed some light on some of the mechanics as I understand them, and I got challenged on a couple of those by Google, by the way, so I think that's something we can talk about too. I did not publish search partner data in there, though I've published it in the past about Performance Max, but I think that's a topic we might want to discuss today too, because we've been talking about Search Partner Network online together the last couple of days. But yeah, I thought let's just get into it then and see where the conversation goes. It's not scripted. We're just here to chat through some stuff. Let me see.
We're here for you. So put questions in the Q&A and we will resist from answering them through typing.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that struck me, it's one of the earlier data points in the report, is that we've seen PMax adoption rolling back a little bit. I mean, in the first place, PMax, it got a lot of market share or cost share very fast by kind of absorbing smart shopping campaigns back in the day. And then it sort of plateaued. It grew more slowly, and now we've seen it starting to drop off. And it's just a little bit every month, but it has been as much as 6% from its peak. Just wanted to see what you think about that, Navah and Greg.
So I'll start with the data that we pulled because it's a useful kind of benchmark.
Hmm.
So last October when we kind of did that, what's going on with PMax, we actually found that 50% of our sample size, which was about 9,200 accounts, had more than 50% spend allocation in PMax. And what was really fascinating about that is that it was a mix between lead gen and e-commerce. So if this was a purely e-commerce data set, I'd be much more inclined to believe that that was just a dumb moment. And also around 18% of accounts had exclusive PMax usage. We've started to
Hmm.
definitely see that rollback in terms of PMax being the same in the auction as shopping campaigns. So folks that thought that they had to run PMax definitely going back into standard shopping land. But what's
Hmm.
also really fascinating is the PMax demand gen swap off. We're definitely seeing a lot of folks who did allocate PMax dollars thinking that it was top of funnel, realizing no, PMax was designed to be bottom of funnel. And what they really wanted was demand gen, which has better controls anyway. So we're definitely seeing, if not a full 10, 15%, maybe like 8-ish% on the average, taking their PMax spend and going into demand gen. So I'm really curious, Greg, are you seeing similar, different?
So I don't have the stats as I'm not a tool necessarily. I mean, I am a tool in a way, but I think one thing that was shocked me just from seeing that sort of decline is for a while, like this is like the 3 years of PMax. You just couldn't run a PMax campaign with a shopping feed for those products and have a shopping feed, just a shopping ads, the PLAs. Your shopping would just disintegrate. You would get no visibility. PMax would just take it, and you wouldn't be able to run the two in conjunction. So, with that change that occurred in what, October of 2024, I thought that there would be almost more adoption of people running PMax and shopping and seeing how that can work. So with that drop, I was pretty surprised because for many of our clients at the time in 2024, like we just couldn't run. We had really good shopping results, and we couldn't run product in a PMax feed if it was in a shopping feed because PMax would just essentially take it and be priority infinity, or I
Mm.
guess negative infinity if lower priority is better.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, for sure, and maybe we can talk about those mechanics a bit, but that's what, like, at first I saw this data. I hadn't pulled this data in quite some time, and I was like, oh, this must be because of the change in priorities. Maybe more people are running them hybrid, and it could certainly be a cause, but the decline actually started last summer. It started before that change in shopping and PMax priority, which I found really interesting.
One thing that we found in the data was folks that had roughly 10 to 20% of their budget going to PMax had not standout best performance, but definitely better than the rest of the other cohorts. And so I'm wondering if folks are starting to realize what PMax was designed to be, which is its bias-free budget allocation. And you're not going to have the lion's share of your budget going to bias-free budget allocation. You're going to have that budget going to siloed campaigns where you have the control, where you have dedicated creative, where you have dedicated targeting. So I think part of what you're seeing coming out in the summer is that folks are getting prepped for Q4
Hmm.
and they want to have their standalone siloed campaigns ready, but they
Yeah.
still want a little bit of that bias-free budget allocation.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, um, I think that definitely makes sense. And I mean, also to speak to your point earlier, there was kind of this big market level misconception that PMax was full funnel. I mean, if you can just Google like PMax full funnel and you'll see a lot of blog articles and news stories and stuff like that. Certainly people have that misconception, but as you mentioned, it's not really. And then to your point about it, optimizing across all these different ad types. Um, I I think there's like in Google's defense here, because it's not just with different channels, you can have different tactics and different targeting, and it gives you a level of control. And Google's philosophy, which they've been saying for years, long before PMax, they said marketers need to start focusing on audiences rather than channels. And I get that, and I think it's good advice, but it's hard to live sometimes. PMax kind of forces you to live it a little bit.
But and there was a really good question in there around negatives and exclusions. So I don't know if you want to take this in that, but it's really important for people to remember that PMax doesn't actually let you actively target anything. You
Mm,
make recommendations on what you want it to do. And yes, search themes will give it some more specific guidance than audience signals, and audience signals do have efficacy in the beginning. But I don't know that enough people truly understand that PMax isn't an active targeting tool, whereas almost every other channel allows for active targeting. So
yeah.
that's why the best way to think about PMax is bias-free budget allocation, where you have 10 to 20% of your budget. It's wild and crazy budget allocation. It's designed to help kind of take care of everything, but then you build in all those other campaign types.
Yeah, and Mike, one other thing just on the adoption, I would imagine that when we look at this next year, I'm just going to put on my crystal ball and you kind of, you know, future vision here. I think this is going to be up in February and up throughout the year.
Mhm.
We got the brand exclusions late in summer, which I think was a big step, and I think some people really understood that. But to Nava's point, I think the negative terms are that came to PMax give people a little bit more sense of comfort. And if you have used PMax in the past, like it can over-index on brand, and really these tools that they're giving, not just the 100 keywords, but the 10,000, I think more people are going to be comfortable saying, like, I know I have some maybe like no fly terms in the account negatives, but now I can really get granular with some of these things. So I think Google's like seeing some of this data, like some declines, and addressing the problem and making it a better tool for advertisers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm pulling up here a table that compares the features that standard shopping has compared to smart shopping compared to Performance Max. And the point here is that PMax has started to check a lot of boxes, or their work in progress are coming soon. Smart shopping, I feel like people preferred it to PMax, and sometimes I don't know why, because it was actually, to me, the low point, the absolute low point. It had no features. PMax has had more features than that for quite some time. Yeah, Nava, chime in.
I know exactly why. It was the Universal Analytics GA4 problem.
Mm,
Everyone hated Universal Analytics. Everyone screamed about Universal Analytics. It was the worst thing ever. But the moment GA4 came about, it's like, oh no, our Universal Analytics, we're so comfy in our despair. Like that
yes.
it I think we just all need to get comfortable with the platforms are going to continue to evolve. But the fact that standard shopping has persisted, the fact that standalone search persists, means that until such time that they don't exist, we will always have our comfort control tools so we can test the wild and crazy budget allocation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. I mean, people are fear change and what's new and all this changing technology. The pace of change is very fast. Um, Yeah, I mean, I just want to mention, by the way, because I speculated in this report that maybe Google is increasing the feature parity between PMax and shopping so that there's there's not really a reason to hate PMax anymore. And to Greg's point about that we might see adoption start coming back again, yeah, Google has shipped some great features, and it could be that spend starts to flow back into PMax. Advertisers are reassured. Some big wallets that were on the fence or were rejecting it, that these kind of late adopters might move in. But interestingly, this is an area where Google directly contradicted me. Ginny Marvin, the product liaison for Google Ads, she said that there are no plans to get rid of standard shopping. So, I mean, I'm glad to hear that. I think standard shopping is not broken. Standard shopping,
No,
yeah. Um, but yeah, it's good. It's good news. I just think, she said that it offers a more consistent experience between these products, and it should be kind of simpler. But I actually find that, what do you think? What do you two think? Because I think for an average advertiser, it might be really confusing. Like, shopping, PMax, these things have very similar features. The targeting is like there's so much in common. Like, what is the difference? What is the appropriate use case? Do you think that that's a problem?
I mean, I think they're very different, right? And to me, there's like one thing that standard shopping has, especially if you have huge product catalogs, that PMax just does not have
Yeah.
at all, doesn't match up, and it's ad group ROAS settings. You
Mm,
can't set an asset group ROAS target. So when you
yes.
have a PMax, it has to be at the campaign level. So if you are trying to do really good segmentation and bid a little bit differently, and Mike, I know segmentation is like huge when you're doing shopping. If you're trying to keep accounts clean and kind of minimize campaigns, but still be really granular, you have some of those levers that you can pull with standard shopping at the ad group level. You do not get that at the PMax level. So what you'll have to do is just make campaign after campaign if you're really trying to segment things. And so for me, that is something that still is like, it's way behind in that case. If you have a big catalog, not everybody has big catalogs, so it's not a problem for everybody. But that to me is like the one thing that PMax still makes it's a problem for PMax if you have shopping.
So
Yeah.
on that point, the thing I'm waiting for is PMax to have unlimited number of campaigns or the 10,000 campaigns. Because currently that limit on the number of PMax campaigns you can have is the only reason why that's a problem. The data that we pulled found that the best performance, and this wasn't close. This was truly best performance, was multiple campaigns, single asset group, so that you could have all of that control. But the problem is if you only have 100 campaigns to work with, you can't really do anything with that unless you're a small advertiser. So
Mm.
I think Google needs to basically weigh whether they want to introduce asset group level targeting settings, which I think we would all love. And I'm sure the performance would then shift to multiple campaigns, multiple asset groups, or even single campaign, multiple asset groups. But until such time that they allow asset group level targeting, I honestly think it would be easier for them to introduce higher thresholds for the number of PMax campaigns. Because again,
Yeah.
the only reason to cap it is that we're testing this. But if this is an established campaign type, we're 3 years in, there's no reason to cap the number of campaigns.
Yeah. That's quite an interesting one. I mean, I I agree with you that more campaigns is typically better than one, and just to I have some data about that. We've seen the everyone getting a view of the oh yeah, getting a preview of the report.
Speed
You
read,
can
speed read.
yeah, exactly. We've seen that the number of campaigns per account is increasing over time, and the modal value, the most common value, is still one, which I find incredibly concerning. Or I mean, it depends, but people are building more sophisticated accounts, and I'm just wondering if there isn't like a middle ground. Because I hear you, Greg, you want this higher level of like we used to do single product asset groups back in the day. Um, I mean, it was crazy what you used to be able to do. And I hear you, Nava, but I also let me go back a slide. Like the thing where I'm not quite on board here is that um, from what I can see, if you could have an unlimited number of campaigns, but the problem is you start splitting up the conversion volume. And based on my experience and the data that I have, target ROAS stops working at a certain point when there's not enough conversions per campaign. And so to me, I think that is the limiting factor on how fine you can segment. And maybe there's a way that they could keep this data pooled by like within the campaign, but then allow some kind of better control at asset group level. I'm not sure what that might look like, but
Am
maybe there's a
I
way.
am I like imagining things, but isn't the data stored at the conversion event level?
It is, and this is something that to me, or sorry, speak that through, Nava.
So the reason I bring that up is that if you have the same conversion event for all of these campaigns, because say for example you're segmenting by region and you want to
Mhm.
have different locations, you would in theory have to have a schedule and a budget that could support all those regions, or you could have a campaign per region and then they all get to share that same conversion event. Same thing with the different products. So I don't know that we would lose the conversion thresholds because it's at that conversion event level. But I'm curious where you think we would lose it if it's at the conversion event level.
Yeah, I mean that that's a super good point. And back in the in the early days of like when PMax was rolling out, we were like, wait, the bidding is at the it's like it's at the conversion event level or conversion action level. So that means in theory, and I think Google might even have documentation saying this, that like the bidding should learn across that event and across the campaigns as long as they have the same conversion action. But I haven't seen that borne out in practice. And like this is an example of what I'm talking about here. This is from an account. These campaigns had the same conversion action. They should be all kind of learning from each other, but you can see that um, basically on the y-axis here is the variance from the ROAS target. So how much the actual ROAS varies from the target ROAS. And as like with these campaigns that have low volumes of conversions, there's a huge amount of variance there. It's just very volatile. And then as the campaigns kind of scale and have more volume, you see that smooth out. And actually the not only that, but the negative outcomes mostly disappear. Everything kind of moves at or above ROAS target.
I have one question about this, and this is a silly American question. This data is mostly European, though.
That's
So
correct. Yeah.
might there be some consent mode, extra modeling mechanics in there that not every market yet has to deal with?
It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. For what it's worth, is a UK retailer, and yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know.
Because
Uh,
and this is,
um,
I don't have any good answer either.
yeah.
But one thing I think I took away from your report is that applying the same rules of engagement where I used to apply for, say, a search campaign or a shopping campaign, you kind of just adapt the messaging. I think technically there, because of the conversion thresholds and privacy mechanics, we actually do have to think about PMax structures differently for different markets.
Mhm.
And the rationale to build out a separate account for each market becomes really, really important. Because if
Mhm.
you're living in a UK or Germany or France or Italy, any part of the EU market, you're going to have different privacy regulations than if you're in Australia or if you're in the US or if you're in Canada. So I wonder if that might be an iteration if you have any other markets, or we can look into it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I can for sure look at like a US account or something like this. But or you or anyone. Yeah, I
Yeah.
welcome anyone. Like I remember someone ran this exact analysis here on some of their data back when I had first published that, and the chart looked nearly identical, and it was it was good. It was kind of validating, but they were also European, if I remember. So it's a really interesting question. Um, but hold on, let me
Do we want
just.
us? Oh, go ahead.
Or no, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, do we want to answer some? There were some really good questions in the Q&A that I keep tagging. Let's answer live. Let's answer live.
Yeah.
Uh, do we want to dive into some of those?
Yeah, let's jump into a couple of these. Was there one that jumped out to you, Nava? Because I haven't read them yet.
Um, I mean, there are a number. I think it would actually be really interesting to talk about the brand exclusions and negatives, and then also shout out to Greg Kohler with the wild search terms, and like where they're coming from. I think that would be a good one for us to talk about. There are some really good questions about number of SKUs, number like there's a number of great questions in here. So it's really just, oh, and of course, there's a great question about search partners, so we can get the search partner rant out of the way.
Yeah, I'm dying to. Um, yeah, let's jump into one of these. What about that one from Greg Kohler? Do you have an so he says with the rollout of search terms, we've seen some wild ones show up. Things like random set of numbers, addresses, or single words that aren't inherently related to us in any way. Where do you think they're coming from? You want to weigh in
So
on that, Nava or Greg?
I'll throw out
Well,
their search partners, but go ahead, Greg.
yeah, I mean, I would just say like when you look at some of those search terms, I look at PMax like broad match.
Yeah.
And I know that I am going to potentially tear up and cry when I look at the search terms, but I also know that's what it's supposed to do, right? Like it's supposed to look at previous search intent, landing page, and your keyword and things like that. Like, so to me, I look at that and say, like, I'm going to focus on, am I hitting, in your case, Greg, my target CPA? Am I looking to hit that? And if so, I'm okay with those things. Like I look at it the same way with broad match and say, I know that I don't have these terms in there. Yes, I want to get rid of no fly zone type terms, like maybe if I'm in the financial space, like no credit, bad credit, things like that. But their previous search might have been what really flagged this to show, not the search that you see in the terms. And I think that's why Google is trying to move away from showing all of those search terms. So for me in PMax, I just kind of know, I like get mentally ready to like to know I'm going to be sad when I go in there, and then I look at the returns and say, oh, it actually worked.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
A shout out. Oh, good.
no, what do you want to say now?
I just want to give a shout out to the diagnostics that shows whether it came from Google's AI or whether it came from the search theme.
Yeah.
If you are upset with the search terms and it came from a search theme, that's a very easy fix. Just change your search theme. But if you're upset with the Google AI, I would take a long, hard look at your website, what the schema is, what the layout is, how easy it is to understand. Because if you're truly upset with the search terms and it's from the AI, a lot of that is coming from Google's understanding of your website. So if your website isn't easy to understand, this is actually really useful insight to bring to your SEO team and say, hey, help. Like why can't Google understand this site? And that might actually give them some preemptive signals like, hey, a core update might be coming that I need to prepare and look at all my title tags, make sure that my schema is set up correctly, like really use it as a collaboration opportunity and as opposed to, oh my God, Google's screwing me over. I mean, in some cases it might be bad, but it's an opportunity to work with the SEO team to fix it.
Yeah, I as soon as I was like, I can just imagine just printing it out on a piece of paper and slamming it down on the desk of your SEO team and saying what's going on. But and to your point, Greg, I think that's good advice about broad match. And we've had our laughs about broad match over the years, but Google is onto something here with broad match and how this might relate to. Like, I also, to Greg Kohler, I have the advice: try Googling these queries. Like in some cases, it might seem like random set of numbers, but maybe is it some kind of like it might be somehow related to a product and you don't realize it. I don't know. I'd love to see a specific example. Greg, just get me on like LinkedIn or Twitter as well, and we can have a look at those.
And then Mike, one other thing you touched on it in the question was some of the brand exclusions, right? And I think that was one of the biggest benefits that we've seen to actually using PMax. I know you have a meme that you put out maybe in 2023 or 2024. It was the Dr. Doom where he took off the mask and instead of Robert Downey, it's like, why is PMax performing? He took it off and there's Robert Downey and it's brand search. You know what I mean? And I think that got a really bad rap. It gave PMax a bad rap where it's like, hey, PMax is working, but why is our brand search down? Why is everything else down? And I think that now with those guide rails, the brand thing works, I would say like 96% of the time.
It's a bit leaky, but
yeah. And then now with negative terms, you're not going to have that problem at all, right? It's going to be like any other campaign out there. So if you were like worried about it from cannibalizing your brand, I would say now you don't have that excuse.
And on the point of not having an excuse, we looked at the data of how many people were doing exclusions, and I think it came out to 58% of folks were not doing exclusions, and they actually had better performance. So if you're not using the exclusions and you're happy with your performance, amazing. If you're not using exclusions and you're sad with your performance, take 2 minutes and go add negatives. Take 2 minutes and go add the brand exclusions. And by the way, if your brand isn't already in there, it is totally okay for you to add a net new brand. If you want to do customer list exclusion, it is okay for you to take all of those beautiful emails that said they don't want to hear from you ever again with consent because you asked for consent, and apply them to your customer list to not target net new customers. So you're not only protecting yourself from kind of going into the cookie jar, but you're also not annoying people who've said that they don't want to hear from you. So
Yeah.
I always get very frustrated with people who complain and scream, but then when they're presented with a solution, they don't take it. So if
Yeah.
you're not using negatives or exclusions because you're strategically not using them, amazing. Like, I'm really happy that you're having that amazing performance. But if you're not using them and you're sad, like, please use them because
I'd
otherwise people
also
will
be,
take them away.
you just red flagged me there. If there's anybody doing what you had said, like, I don't care about your performance in PMax. If you're just going and you're getting all of your volume from your brand, you're not doing anything incremental. You're not doing anything scale. You're not making scalable. You're not doing making PMax go work hard and do what it does. It's just eating your brand search. So I would assume anybody that doesn't have any brand exclusion is doing amazing because they're buying their own name. Like that's to me, I think that's something what we don't ever like. I mean, we do, but I don't think a lot of advertisers look at it and be like, "Oh, look at these in-platform metrics." And it's like, "Well, yeah, it's
Well,
just because it's
so
people looking for PPC Greg."
So actually, the performance was pretty flat between those that used and didn't use brand exclusions. Um, the overall exclusion performance, though, of like not having negative keywords or not using placement exclusions, that's where the performance was interestingly better. So I think it is really important that people take a look at performance and take a look at what's happening, but also like, please don't complain and then don't do the thing. Like,
Yeah.
if you're upset that you feel like your brand is being cannibalized, use the brand exclusions, use the audience list exclusion, put in the negative keywords, make placement exclusions, like do all the things. And then
You
if you're still upset, we can then have a productive conversation about how we can do better.
you forgot, Nava, that some people don't want to be happy.
That's
Um,
fair.
but I mean, yeah, I mean, so I just want to shout out a couple things here. Like we published a script, a brand non-brand script for PMax, which will help you see this segmentation and you see the performance difference between the two, or at least in the stuff that's available through search term insights. So like the conversion rate, for example, the difference there, and you can see how differently these two segments behave. You can see, is this volume problematic for me? Is it there? Is it not there? You can also see if you implemented brand exclusions or negatives, you can check that that's working because you should see the traffic drop off or go to zero. But I also really want to shout out this great blog post. I don't know if either of you read it. It was from Andrew Lolk, and it was about this brand buying topic. And because like I didn't make that script so that people would just like hate the brand in PMax and turn it off. I mean, certainly I was concerned about it. I want people to know about it, but I just want people to make an informed decision. And what I love about that article from Andrew is that he explains pretty comprehensively all the different reasons why and logics about when brand might make sense for you and when not, and because it's not completely black and white. But as a baseline, PMax definitely likes brand traffic. Its job, I say this till I'm blue in the face, its job is to max performance based on in-platform data. So of course it goes after remarketing, of course it goes after best-selling products, and of course it goes after brand traffic because all of those things are demand, they have a lot of demand and they're going to perform well. There's going to be good conversion rate in there. There's going to be volume in there. But as Greg said, it's about making these campaign types work harder for your business. And so I think that's why I tend to lean toward excluding brand, but there's a million contexts and scenarios. It's one of those it depends things. I didn't want to say that, but it depends. Hold on here. I just want to, what time we at? Hold on. There's my clock. Okay, good. We're about halfway through the hour. Um, really enjoying this conversation so far. So we talked a bit about what the data says about PMax adoption, how it's involved with reports and controls. I mean, we also talked about the interaction with the campaigns a bit, but I just want to take 1 sec, if it's okay with you guys, and return to that because, where's my window? Because Google said that I'm wrong. And I would like to hear some other opinions here because I I fully respect that this is the official answer from Google. But sometimes I need to be hit over the head with a stick till I get something, or I've just, yeah, hold on. Let me show
I
one.
don't even know what they're disagreeing with you about, Mike, but I'm on your side.
Thank you, Greg. I
So
knew you would be.
is this about the ad rank thing?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so I was at Ad World Experience. Shout out to Gianpaolo's amazing event. Like all of you should go sign up for Ad World Experience 2025. It is one
For
of the few
sure.
events where I go learn and it's amazing and like go register for it. Um, I was at Ad World Experience when this news broke. And the room was split exactly in half. Half of folks were like, this is great. We'll be able to take full control with our standard shopping. And we'll be able to actually control things with the bid because that's ultimately what's the deciding factor here. And others were like, oh my God, PMax is going to make us drive up our bids for
Mm.
standard shopping. How we've seen it play out, and granted, this is e-commerce is maybe 30% of our book of business. So it's not the full width and breadth, but we have seen it play out where bids are decreasing slightly for standard shopping and impression share has been flat. It's not been like a big skyrocket where standard shopping is picking up all of this additional impression share, all of this additional market share, but it seems like it is what Google is saying is correct. If people are taking the correct actions, if you bid too aggressively and you kind of assume that PMax is going to drive up the price, you might end up pricing yourself out. That's my 2 cents.
Mhm. Let's just unpack this a bit. So before, as Greg said, PMax had this kind of infinite priority over standard shopping. So this would be if you're serving the same products in PMax and standard shopping. Then kind of the next thing is there a query overlap? So, for example, some people were excluding brand from PMax, and then there's no longer a query overlap there, and shopping would pick up that traffic. But provided that there's this same search term or query overlap and the same product overlap, previously PMax always won, and now they're on equal footing. And or rather, it's solved by ad rank. And when I asked Ginny about this back then in October, she said that because the question this came up in a conversation with like Kirk Williams and some others were like, but how does PMax and shopping have different ad rank than each other on the same product? Because like Google handles the relevance because they handle the product and search term matching. They're based on the same feed, so there's nothing really different creatively or asset wise about them. And they're targeting the same landing page. Like where is the difference here? And Ginny weighed in and said that this is correct. The differentiating factor or the determining factor in ad rank is the bid.
Bid.
Um,
Yep.
and to me, this implies that a bidding escalation is possible, which I wrote in this report. And Ginny then weighed in on this report and said that a bid escalation will not occur. And I need someone to hold my hand and walk me through it because um,
I
I
have a tin hat theory on this.
okay.
This is not proven out. This is not tin hat theory. With Google's improved, updated, whichever word you want to use, documentation, that there are different places on the search result page and they have different auction prices. I have a feeling what they've done, even though they haven't spelled it out, is that PMax placements potentially have different spots on the SERP, even in the same shopping interface. So if there's maybe the first 3 products are for standard shopping and next 3 for PMax, or that the top section is for standard shopping, and then there's another shopping section that goes to PMax. And these are just different spots on the search result page that are reserved for search versus PMax. I don't love that if that's true, but that's the best way I can think of it, that there wouldn't be any escalation. Because if there's different spots on the search result page and they've said that those represent different auctions, so you can have multiple placements based off of different campaigns, whatnot. That's the only way I can square that circle.
I don't know. I feel like that. If to be honest, it does feel tinfoil. It feels more tinfoil than my tinfoil. I don't know.
I
Like,
was gonna say that. Mike, I've got something for you.
okay.
Have you ever had a shopping campaign with a certain set of products in there, and then also had a maybe a catch-all campaign that might be a higher ROAS and might be just in case maybe your budget went out or something slipped through the cracks, and you wanted to just make sure you've got all sorts of coverage in this, and they're both just shopping.
Yeah, sure, sure. But
Does that bid against each other?
yeah, but with different targets. Yeah. I mean, I like imagine though if you have highly differentiated targets, I think that this also kind of the problem resolves itself a bit, or it's of course the one with the higher bid wins. But like imagining that you've got rather similar targets and rather similar like I just if at scale the one with the higher bid always wins, then it seems like it would result in bid escalation within your account.
So to me, I think it's like one. So you've got your product, right? It's either in shopping or it's in PMax, and then Google looks at it and says which one has a higher ad rank or the more aggressive bid, and then
Yeah.
puts that into auction.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the, and we see that with like some of those catch-all, like because we'll run the same target and just have have let's say it's just a certain product category, and then we've got maybe like an all catch-all that might be targeting desktop or something.
Yeah.
They don't we don't see any like competition where they're going against each other from shopping to shopping. It's like which one is the better one? Boom, that goes to shopping. And I
Mm.
would look at it like that when Jenny says that. It's like whichever one has the best bid makes it to auction.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm just that makes sense. But I guess you're talking about I mean, my recommendation here, by the way, is that you have if you're running the same products in parallel on both campaign types, that you do have meaningfully different targets. That way, whatever's occurring is occurring kind of on purpose. Um,
100%. Yeah.
because yeah, and then I think it's like what you're saying with like the catch-all and stuff. I think that totally makes sense. But for someone, and maybe this is just a totally unrealistic scenario, and no one would do this, but for someone who would set comparable budgets, comparable bids in terms of ROAS targets, if it feels, I mean, and what would you get? Like why should the one that had a higher bid if they're close to each other? Why should you get if you could have gotten an impression in that auction for the lower bid? I guess then you'll get a higher position in the
Well,
PLAs.
so
But
Mike, why do some ads or keywords, when you look at the eligibility criteria, say, we have no idea why your ad didn't serve right now, or
The
your
diagnostic
ad
tool
is
is like
serving it.
broken. That's why.
Yeah, like I don't know until we get concrete documentation that there will
yes,
be any path that makes sense that isn't at least a little bit tinfoily.
show me the
Um,
documents. That's what I want.
yeah.
Jenny, if you're listening.
But just it's worth remembering that there was a similar process that happened with keywords when we all made the switch from manual to smart bidding.
Yeah.
So with manual bidding, there was a very popular bidding strategy of tiering the bids, and you would have like your highest bid for exact and your middle bid for phrase and your lowest bid for broad. So you would kind of tier the auction entering.
Mhm.
Um, when smart bidding happened, if you had all of them, you basically were escalating your bids because they were all going to end up pushing each other up. So you would pick kind of one version of the keyword to represent you in the auction for the different match types, and you would be more strategic about it. So I
Mm.
think that might be what is tripping us up, is that we're so used to thinking about this from search as opposed to PMax and shopping, and there wasn't really a comparable like conversion process before. So we need that path forward of documentation to help us make that leap of understanding, like how do we structure things so that we don't mess up our bid.
I'm adding it to the X files. I have a stack full of shelves full of boxes full of things where I want more documentation from Google. But I just want to mention one more thing because also in the interest of transparency, because officially Google says that I'm wrong, and I don't want people to take the wrong conclusions here. But I find that there's a concerning and very similar problem between PMax and demand gen. And by the way, it was someone from Google's product team who told me that this is happening. And that's what set me down this road. But now someone else from Google's product team has told me otherwise. And Jenny pulls rank, I guess. But again, especially if you're serving feed, if you have a feed in your demand gen campaigns, then those feed-based ads in particular, it seems to me that there's quite a risk of coming into conflict. And we talked earlier about the difference in like queries between shopping and PMax, and there's something similar occurring with demand gen where in principle, demand gen is mid-funnel and PMax is bottom funnel. There's this kind of targeting differentiation there. But I think if you're like turning your demand gen campaign, if you're making it more conversion oriented and putting in a feed, to me, this is making it a bit too similar to PMax for my comfort zone. I think you should kind of let demand gen be demand gen and not try to make it, because there's just an awful lot of overlap there that I worry about. But
Can I go one step further
Mhm.
on this? When Search Max inevitably comes out,
Yes.
what is the need for PMax? Before, Demand Gen didn't have display in there. Demand Gen has lookalikes. They actually have audiences. I understand that PMax has audience signals, but you
Yep.
can have Search Max. You can get display now. You can do YouTube. You can do Gmail. You can do Discover with Demand Gen. And if you want to, you can allocate differently by separating those out into different campaigns. And then you can have Search Max. So what would the need for PMax even be when this comes to fruition?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. PMax is still like, and there's another chart, but I'm not going to pull those up again. Just trust me. It's usually most commonly it's like 90% shopping. And I think that PMax, this is the thing. Like, I feel like Google's going in so many directions at once. Like demand gen is becoming an incredibly attractive campaign type with like these channel controls in there. It's kind of so broken in a way, like a good way. Like you can customize it so much. And you know, we're getting a very clear signal that they're not getting rid of shopping anytime soon. And then if we look over at SearchMax, what I think is brilliant about SearchMax, just one sec, Nava, because Greg, I think if Google said we're upgrading search campaigns into PMax, you would be furious. But instead, they're adding SearchMax into search campaigns, and you like it. You're interested in it. And I think that's something that they did was really smart. They're not bringing search to PMax. They're bringing PMax to search. That's what SearchMax is. But what did you want to say, Nava?
So it's really important to take a step back and remember what PMax was designed to do. It was designed to diversify ad investment into all these other channels. It remains the bias-free budget allocation tool. So there will be some brands that will always find that sort of investment attractive, where they don't think to go after something, they don't think to do whatever. So they find that attractive. But I expect that PMax is going to start to be that 10 to 20 at most 25% of budget allocation, and everything else is going to be that much more controlled ecosystem. With demand gen, though, it is important to remember that demand gen still heavily relies on people to be artistically creative. And we are not an artistically creative bunch as search marketers or search first marketers. Social first marketers are incredibly creative. Video first marketers are incredibly creative, but search first marketers are not. And PMax remains an opportunity to still get a lot of those channels while still leaning heavily into text. So I'm not saying that PMax is the best. I'm not saying that PMax is the worst. I just don't see PMax going anywhere, even with SearchMax coming, specifically because we're so bad at creative, and demand gen requires you to actually think about visuals. And for whatever reason, we're just terrible at it.
Yeah, I mean they're very open. If you've seen Google's sales decks and materials for demand gen, they're very open that they're targeting social budgets. In fact, they're specifically targeting meta budgets. And so I think that they want those people to start using Google Ads, which isn't necessarily the case right now. Often a bit of specialization in a lot of companies, as you're mentioning here. But
And it's worth noting that Microsoft made that play before Google did. Microsoft put in a meta import to help people use the audience network, which
mm,
we can talk. That's a whole other conversation. I'm not going to derail our PMax talk to talk about Microsoft Audience Network.
we can talk
Um,
about search partners.
we can talk about search writers. But no, the thing to remember is that search first channels are really trying to help us search first marketers overcome visual pieces. And the reason why I think demand gen is so cool and so interesting is that it's bringing social first controls and targeting mechanisms to Google. Whereas if you take a Google first marketer and plop them into Meta, they usually flounder because they're not used to how to think about asset groups, or rather ad sets. They're not used to how to think about campaign level versus ad set level targeting and budgeting. And so I think demand gen is a good translation tool. I think PMax is the bias-free budget allocation, but both of them require visuals. It's just that PMax tends to be better at not putting the burden on the advertiser, whereas demand gen, you still have to have some visual chops.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree with that. I think that's all correct. I mean, I want to circle back to Greg, and also I'm looking, we're in our last 10 minutes here. I don't know if we're gonna have time for more questions. There's a bunch in there. Otherwise, I often write a blog post that answers some of them or as many as I can. Um, but yeah, like Greg, you were talking about with Search Max coming on, you see that what's the reason for PMax anymore? With Search Max and Demand Gen, they each cover these different parts. But I think the thing that will definitely be on the chopping block this year, or they'll announce the sunset this year, is DSA. What do you think about that?
I agree. I like page feeds in PMax. I set up campaigns specifically in a certain category, pull in all of those page feeds, just label it and then pull that in. Page feeds work very well. I would agree. DSAs are probably not going to be around in 2026,
Yeah.
2026 and a half.
We've got Google Marketing Live coming up in May. I think they're going to make a big deal out of PMax, Demand Gen, and Search Max. Search Max still, Google has been silent about it. I think they're saving it for a special occasion in mid to late May. And
Yeah.
and I think soon after that I think they'll announce the sunset of DSA with a 1 year sunset like usual. Just my personal bet. We can set up a poly market for that.
I think
Retweet.
everyone should set up a DSA campaign now because I agree it's going to get sunset. But I have a feeling what they'll do is they'll still let you uh keep it kind of like expanded text
Like
ads.
they did, yeah.
Yeah, and so DSA is not only useful for targeting and being incredibly helpful as a campaign type, it's also really useful competitive intelligence. So I would encourage everyone to take advantage of DSA while it's still here because it's a chance to get insights into your competitors' uh, content, into their search volume, into the types of ads that Google would run for them. So how well Google understands them. Uh, yeah, so I'm actually very sad about DSA going away. I love DSA, but I acknowledge it's likely going away. So I would just encourage everyone while you have it, take the privilege of being an earlier advertiser, get the DSA campaigns built, and then we'll do what we can.
Yeah. Wise words. And yeah, I think I agree. There could be this kind of thing where it lives on in a zombie form for some time afterward. But we're in our last minutes here, and thanks to everyone who wrote a question. Like we would need another hour to go through these. There's 22 open questions. But as I said, maybe we can write up some answers later on. And I don't know, any closing thoughts? Like I don't know, Greg, do you have any final words about PMax or the year ahead?
Yeah, I would say if you're here and you're not trying PMax, there's one thing, at least if you're on the lead gen side, that you should absolutely do, or you should not use PMax. And it's to have a very high friction, lower funnel or mid funnel, at least conversion action. A lot of people go out there and will say, I just want leads. For some reason, you get nonstop spam in that way. But if
Mhm.
you're feeding it an SQL, or we have another client, we're feeding it a pre-qual, it has to go through a credit check, and that's the only way that it can count as a conversion. It can work. And I think a lot of people were turned off to PMax when it came out because it was touted as this like amazing product. And honestly, it sucked when it came out. And now it
Yes.
doesn't. And I think that's something that Google is still fighting against is when you come out and you say this thing is amazing and you look and it's over indexing on brand and it's all remarketing, you lose a little bit of trust in that. And I'm here to say, like, now the product can be good. Again, feed it the right information. And I would say test it out. Even if you have bad experience in the past, don't let that become who you are. Grow and give it a shot.
And I'll echo those sentiments. Please use conversion values. Please speak to Google in the way that it wants to be spoken to. I've yet to see max conversions at scale beat max conversion value, even for lead gen. And the reason for that is that if you can give it that information about what sorts of leads are useful and what sorts of leads are not based off of the value, it will start to understand that I can't just keep driving you these spammy leads that are filling out a form, but not actually following up with your sales team or booking the demo or completing the account creation. Really take the time to audit what conversion actions you have, apply conversion values, leverage those. And also bear in mind, if your PMax creative is not making you happy, and a lot of it is dependent on your website, talk to your SEO team. Google made a whole bunch of changes to how it thinks about landing page experience, where it now likes navigation, it now likes kind of that more complete experience. So we are probably going to see a shift to more people leaning into sending traffic to like the main site instead of PPC landing pages. Just be really clear about no index, no follow. Do not have URL expansion turned on. Your SEO team will kill you. They will find you. They will beat you up. Um, but you also want to make sure that you have conversations with your SEO team about why you may need certain things, because there are still some certain PPC rules of engagement that are different than SEO rules of engagement. So even though we now might want to start thinking about sending traffic there for PMax or any other campaign type, we definitely want to be careful about how much we use or lean into URL expansion.
Mhm.
And Mike, can I add one more thing just as a warning?
Sure.
Where people are seeing, I know Anthony Higman just had a recent example. A few other folks have seen it. We're seeing more video showing up in search,
Mm.
just a
Yeah.
full video showing up there.
Yeah.
So
It's
if
interesting.
you are not doing shopping, you're not going after like PLAs and it's feed only, and you don't like your video, you may want to invest in video because that does seem like there's more and more of that happening. And that could be something that could hinder your success.
And it will pull from your Google business profile. That is a very important thing to note. So yes, you should link your Google business profile. If your Google business profile has those weird videos, be be super careful.
Good tips there in the kind of buzzer beating moments. I'm just looking at the clock. So Greg telling us to give PMax a shot if you didn't like it at first. They've improved it a lot, and Nava reminding us to align with your SEO team more than ever. I think that's very relevant both for lead gen and for e-commerce. I think that the lines are blurring between paid and organic with this kind of merchant SEO theme. I'm stealing that phrase from my friend Tony Zara, but yeah, we'll leave it at that. I've got one piece of advice before you. Please check out the State of PMax report. Please check out Marketing O'Clock. That's Greg's podcast from Cypress North. Definitely check out Nava's data over at the Optmyzr blog. And thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Nava and Greg, for joining me.
Thank you
Thanks so
everyone for
much for
investing
having
the
us.
hour. Thanks for having
Absolutely.
Yeah.
us.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.